I was saying you sound different, like just older. It's been a long time since I talked to you.
That is true. I think when I was on RapPad in 2016, I was like 14. So
Yep. Yeah.
now I'm
Wow.
like 18 and in LA and all that shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna. That's actually the first question of like how does that feel? Because it's crazy. It's actually crazy because I remember talking to you before you blew up, and you were kind of like. It's not that you were new to it. You were really good before I ever met you or talked to you, and I remember that. I remember the track you did with, was it Raheem, and was it Dom or somebody else?
I think it was Nick Grace.
Yes.
Hate Me?
Yes. I remember listening to that verse, and I was like, damn, you just have such a good grip on like the overall like thematic essence of coming into a song and dropping a verse, which a lot of people don't get, especially early on. Like even for me, I wasn't that good. I was just kind of like trying to flex, but I wasn't that good. But you really had a good understanding of it. Like, did you ever kind of think about it, or was it just natural, like it came out of nowhere?
I mean, to be very real, I didn't truly think about it. And I mean, now even when I go back and listen to my older stuff, it's a bit cringy to me personally.
I feel you.
But I think honestly, it just kind of comes from like I took a whole lot of inspiration from other people instead of trying to like build my own lane in the beginning.
Gotcha.
Because when I just started off, I didn't really even consider the fact that this could be a career. It was just a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I was listening to Kyle, I was listening to Chance the Rapper, and then even people from RapPad like Dom, and I was listening to Nick Grace. And it did kind of feel important to me to, you know, be able to flow well, be able to be versatile on this type of vibe and this type of vibe, and like come in on a song easier. And I mean, I think even on that, like to this day, feature verses are easier to me because it's just like it's like riffing off of someone else's vibe.
Right.
I've never really thought about it, but I mean, if I do, I feel like it does come from, you know, just kind of bringing myself up in music culture as a fan and a listener rather than trying to start off as an artist.
Right.
And even then it was just a hobby.
Right. And I totally agree with you. Like, I think that's even one of the things I was preaching early on, was that like your influences really determine everything about how you sound when you hit the microphone. And one of the things that I'll tell people constantly is like, choose your influences wisely. Like you brought up Chance the Rapper. That's a really high bar. Like, even when that dude, because he was 16 when he made 10 Day. And 10 Day
Which
in
was
itself.
A crazy project.
Right.
Crazy.
Absolutely crazy. Like he even had two versions of Windows, and the first version was recorded when he was 16 and it still sounded dope. And he put both versions on the tape. That was just one of my favorite overall things. But I got more questions for you too.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, we already kind of like touched on this, but you joined RapPad when? Like mid 2016?
March 5th, 2016.
Wow. That was actually like well before I did, like 6 months or something.
It's cool that you can just see the date on the page, but yeah.
Right, yeah.
It was like right before. Oh, wow. I think that would be right before my 14th birthday. Yeah.
Okay.
I joined RapPad right before my 14th birthday. And I guess I did it because I was kind of looking at rap forums. I did that before I was really even interested in rapping. And so when I first hopped on, I wasn't like trying to write anything. I was just like, this is like genius, but different. And I was exploring the internet and listening to Dom and Nick Grace. And there was a guy named like Project and like all these people just right before I started.
All of those people actually went on to do some really crazy stuff too. Like Project worked with Tentacion's team like multiple times. It's actually it's wild. It's wild to look at the bottom level of the site, like kind of back then when things were still really just bubbling up, and how there's like a whole group of artists that kind of ejected themselves from that platform and really went somewhere with it. I don't really know about Entree Band though, because I feel like they might have come in with a lot to offer already. But at the same time, it's like when you come into a space like that and there's so much fuel for the fire and so many people there who are like really making real music, it really serves as a great like fire under your own ass to say like, make some dope music, like don't just write it, actually put it into something. It's really hard to put into words, but it's something that I've always had an appreciation for as well. So since then, how's your perspective on lyricism changed?
That's actually a very interesting one. I mean, just throwing it way back, like 2016, 2017, and I think I stopped using the site super frequently, besides like for writing around 2018. You know, in the beginning, to me, it was all about lyrics. And I mean, I'm a hip hop head at heart. Bars are bars, and nothing is cooler. Nothing's like sicker. But to me, my view on lyricism has changed to the point where I feel like I used to try to focus on it too much, and I didn't care about the songwriting aspect when creating music. And you know, I'm glad to see that the artists from RapPad who kind of were on that base level have also evolved to the same level of thinking. To elaborate, I kind of just mean like, I used to think that if every 4-bar cluster didn't end with a punchline, the song couldn't be good at all. But once I started realizing that, of course, you got to be saying something. You can't just be spitting out words. But my view on lyricism is, it used to be everything, and now it's just a few parts to the whole that, to me, makes art, you know?
Right.
You have to... Because, like, I mean, first things first, I feel like if your flow's not good, no one's going to listen to what you're saying. I feel like, you know, if the beat and the production's not good, the mixing's not good, no one's going to listen. If the concept is off, like, you know, I'm 18, a musician living in California, you know, just whole career off of music. I'm not going to rap about selling dope.
Right.
People are going to look at me and be like, no.
Right.
And so, like, kind of over the past 4 years or so of rapping, it has become more apparent to me that not lyricism can take a back burner. Because, again, I mean, like, all my inspirations right now are spitting. But that all of the people that are really, truly great, best to do it, in my opinion, Andre 3000, for example, he would say off the charts, like top level stuff, and then everything else about the song would be exactly on that level instead of him seemingly focusing on it.
That's a really interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people
Sometimes I ramble.
Well, there's a lot of people who kind of, because there's a fine line between saying what you want to say and then writing down lyrics and like making that happen.
Yeah.
Like, everybody has something to say, and I feel like they kind of make a divide there where they're like, well, I don't want to just say what I want to say. I want to say something cool. Because they're like, oh, I'm a rapper and I have to make an impact. But then if you look at the best who've ever done it, that's not what they do. They just get onto the microphone and they get really honest and they use their skills. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't take into account is like for example, you just mentioned how you had influences. So flow and rhyme schemes and lyricism is something you can just pick up. Like, I don't know if you ever watched Heroes. like when you were growing up or recently?
I don't know what that is.
It's a TV show about people who have powers, but they all have different powers. And one of my favorite ones was this dude named Peter Petrelli. So the way he would do it is he would just literally make like eye contact or touch a person, and he would learn everything that they know. And that's what I always equated it to, is like your brain can basically watch something happen and it can break down in real time what's going on. And then in the future, when you want to do something like that, you have all that information like available. Especially lyricism and flow is something you can do like completely internal. You don't necessarily have to be rapping to have all that stuff going on in your mind. And then 5 years later, maybe you never ever wrote anything down, but you still have this basis of like, I know what flow is. I know like what flows really, really impact me. So then I know what to write. Yeah. We got more.
No.
So being independent so early on in your life, because a lot of people make music for years or decades, right? And they don't make it, or they're still trying to make it. So how does it feel for you to kind of like come in and just immediately hit the track? And you've been kind of going ever since. And now, especially, you're independent. You have a place, right? Like you have a place for yourself now. Yeah. You're taking care of yourself. So how does that feel?
That's a good question. I think you are very correct. Like for some people, it takes years and years and decades. I think for me, rather than it simply just being like I kind of came out and hit the track and got to it, I got a very early start, which definitely makes it seem so. Because like I was making like, I mean, it's still awesome to make any amount of money off of your art. But like I was making like $200 a month max until like 2019.
Okay.
Late 2018. But that was okay because, you know, I was 14, 15, 16 living with my parents.
Right.
You know, and it does, honestly, I do feel like it has to do with a bit of luck because, you know, back then, I don't feel like I was the dopest MC that I knew. I don't feel like I was necessarily doing it better than most people. It's that I got in front of people.
Right.
And it does feel really cool to be ahead of the curve. You know, I'm happy that right now I don't have to be in school. I can just live my life, focus on, you know, now that I've kind of made a nest for myself, I can build it up and develop it into something more. And I do think it really is because, you know, I joined RapPad at 13. I started making music tracks at 14, which were horrific. And then at 15, I made Lovesad-KID, which I don't personally think is great. I'm wearing the shirt right now. I don't personally think it's great, but it's cool to look back on and be like, this is what I used to do. This is how I used to sound, and kind of have track records and milestones. I mean, honestly, I don't even think about it most of the time. Like, I have been rapping for 4, soon to be 5 years, in like 5 months. And I believe for the people that I'm around, and since most of my friends are artists, it takes about 4 to 5 years of like consistent working to live off of it. Like, I have a friend named Austin Atwood, he goes by.
Okay.
A friend named Kai Dreams, who is mega famous right now. A friend named Forrest, who's mega famous right now. And it all took them around that 4 to 5 year period to really build it up. I think Austin's 24 now, and he was rapping since about 17. And then he really hit his stride like 2 years ago or so.
Okay.
I keep getting off topic, but it's cool to get ahead of the curve. I just do think that I have gotten more ahead of the curve in terms of I got an earlier start rather than I believe it took me less time than it takes other people.
Right. Well, you also, it's not that you skipped over anything. It's that there's a lot of artists who, instead of being consistent and creating their brand and their idea and then sticking with it, they go through years of phasing back and forth, creating new platforms, removing their albums. Like, I have a ton of music that I've removed. And, especially depending on what kind of artist you are, like, you could end up, kind of negating your entire discography and basically starting from scratch 4 years later. Whereas with you, it's almost like you found that medium between like you as an artist and you as a person early on, enough so that you could do it like a lot, which a lot of people don't do. They kind of sit in this space where it's not that they're unable to make music at all. It's really just that it's like there's a constant struggle of trying to get an entire song out and then trying to understand like what it's about and what the impact is. Whereas I feel like you had themes for your whole life and they kind of coincided with your personal life, which I think might be a lesson that a lot of us can take, which is that when you're able to merge those, you're able to get a whole lot more done. Whereas if you're kind of living like a double life, right? Where it's like 4 hours a day, you're just an artist, and then for the rest of the day, you're totally somebody else. And it seemed like you were very raw and honest about your own life, even if it was like high school, middle school is always cringy. So even if you look back on that and you're like, oh man, that was kind of childish compared to now, it was still the same kind of backbone that anybody would have for their career or their life. Just kind of like you did it early, which is also, it's actually just really cool. Especially, I've mentioned you multiple times over the years to other artists who are like, I don't know what to do about X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, man, there are examples of people who maybe they're not necessarily working with Chance the Rapper or they're making, $10,000 a month or anything like that. But they still set up a foundation and they
I wish.
right? Like, I think we all do. But they still set up a foundation that's like, I can work off this and then soon I can live off of this, which it takes time. Like you can't just do it immediately and then start making $2,000 a month. So that's really, really cool. So as far as your style right now, or even back then, or as a totality, what are your plans for the future? I know I heard one of your tracks that you put up on Instagram. I think you put up like a free verse or like a 2-minute song on IGTV or something, and it was really good. Yeah. I really enjoyed that. So my question is, are you kind of more planning to do like, I wouldn't necessarily say it's just lyrical. It seemed just a lot more honest. Like it seemed like a very honest track. So are you planning on kind of sticking with that? Like you kind of always have been, but then you're also changing as a person. As you get older, you change, and those changes can be drastic as well. So are you just kind of going to stick with the honesty, or do you have plans for how you're going to set yourself up stylistically?
I do have plans, actually. That's a good question. So, I mean, just to bring it back, 14, like 2016, at the end of the year, I found out what lo-fi was. Mm-hmm. And I actually made my first track over a Joji beat, instrumental, before knowing what lo-fi was, and it just kind of fit right in that pocket, and it was like my oxygen. And then I think from there to every song to like 2018, I was just kind of focusing on narrowing everything down. Most of them were love songs, but I mean, I didn't have much else to rap about at 15, 16. And then I kind of hit 2018, 2019, and 2018 was a period of development for me. I started rapping more about myself over the same instrumentals, but like I dropped Simple, Homeschooled, Daydream, all these songs that were in the same vein of the type of music that it was, but different in the concepts and what I was trying to speak about, what I was trying to hit with it. And 2019 hit. And to bring up a relevant point we talked about later, you know, I did rap basically just about everything that happened in my life, to the point where 2019 hit, I had like 60 songs out released, which is a ridiculous amount because they're all just like a minute. And I had these 60 songs out, and I realized 50 of them are love songs. Most of them about people who don't even exist, just feelings. And I kind of decided for myself as an artist, I want to rap about something. I want to build concepts deeper than just I'm a teenager spitting poems over flipped samples.
Right.
And late 2019, I wrote Roller Rink, which I think was the first step in the direction to a project that I dropped in April, Growth. To me, that's where my sound is at. I really, when I sit down and listen to music, when I'm listening to rap, I love new stuff. I'm not gonna be like, it's all bad, but like, I really am influenced and inspired by old, like gritty boom bap and like lo-fi old tracks, Nujabes, Tampa beats, Dilla's Donuts, and Doom, which I mostly like the instrumentals for, but that's a controversial hip-hop opinion. And I feel like what I want to do with Lovesad-KID is I want to try and push an era of modern boom bap.
Okay.
I want to take the certain notes of like, rapping about all these certain types of topics over cool drum patterns and really, really trying to say something. I mean, Growth is like 70 bars. It's like a 3-minute long song, longest song I dropped ever. And for that entire song, I was just rapping, but I want to bring in the influence of music that I like now. Synths and keys, electronic noises, sub basses, hooks, singing. And I feel like what I'm trying to do for myself at the moment is mesh everything that I like about music now and mesh everything I like about music then and kind of drive it forward. And the next step for me musically is I'm going to take what I did with my Playground EP in the beginning of the year and what I did with Growth and kind of try to bridge between the channels of what I like between both of them.
Okay.
Just to create something new, because like I've always liked singing. Now I'm just good enough to do it, like without my voice cracking and stuff. And I've always liked rapping, but I feel now I'm consistent enough to do it without having to stress about whether this sounds right or something.
Right.
And I just kind of want to build that up and really, like, hopefully, if everything goes well, inspire a new age, a new genre. I want to hear Lovesad-KID type beats in a few years, and it's what we're talking about right now. And additionally to that, I haven't really mentioned this anywhere personal or publicly, but I'm starting a side project. Just kind of like that indie rock vibe, pop punk songs, all these things. Just because I do love rapping and I love what I'm trying to build with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, all the channels I'm trying to let influence me. But at the same time, I feel like in those 4 years that I've been rapping, I've grown as an artist. And while I'm never going to stop writing over hip hop beats and boom bap tracks. Now I crave something more. It used to be all about rapping and all that, but I honestly do feel like it's because I couldn't sing. It's because I couldn't play guitar.
Right.
It's because I couldn't develop myself into more. And I do know that, if everything was in my control, I would take where Lovesad-KID is at and I would drop these side project songs on it and then come back and rap later. But knowing how fickle streaming is and how fickle fans are even, I don't want to forsake the brand that I've made with Lovesad-KID. I want to build it up. So the direction I'm taking for Lovesad-KID is that modern boom bap. I want to kind of evolve what Isaiah Rashad left us with, and Saba is also pushing that sound, I think. But for me personally, I'm trying to expand as an artist and do things that I used to just not have the songwriting abilities for, the voice for. And for me, that means, singing and making these folk songs,
Right.
And that's just kind of where I'm at with it. And starting next year, it's just going to be a whole lot of work and effort.
Well, that's awesome. And especially if I remember right, you have like roots with folk music as well. But I could be remembering that wrong.
I do, but are you thinking of Matter, who makes like a lot of folk?
No, I'm thinking of when we spoke early on and you were like, yeah, I used to listen to a lot of country music and like folk music.
My mom would only play country music in the car.
Okay.
And I'm not really interested in that kind of sound. To me, I feel like country's the worst genre, but I that kind of, vibe is ingrained into me. It's
okay.
It is what I grew up with music wise, and then hip hop is something I learned.
Okay. Well, that makes perfect sense, but it's kind of like as an example for me personally, I don't have two projects. More so, I just like to get really, really crazy with singing. Like I try to get like Radiohead level when I'm writing out a hook. Like I really want that stuff to just go. Whereas it's kind of like for you want to make like actual full on, singing songs like folk music, and then you also want to do the rap. And for me, like I have roots with Radiohead. Like my mother only played like somber music like Nirvana and Radiohead and like, alternative stuff. Whereas for you, because I feel like country music especially is kind of like the far opposite almost of hip hop, right? Even though they're like super similar, they're also sisters because the subject matter might be similar, but then at the same time they're totally different sonically.
They're handling it like completely different.
Exactly. But then folk music is also kind of an in-between there. I think you might have frozen. Oh.
Something that I'm like, oh.
Okay.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're back now. It literally it stopped and then it caught up.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I even want to take it a step far as, kind of branching into what artists like Omar Apollo and Dominic Fike are doing. An artist named Yeek, who I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but like, I just have so many inspirations that I've always had and always have constantly been developing. And I feel like, the time right now is where I actually can. Because, at 15, I couldn't have made a singing song. and had it sound anywhere near as good. And maybe it's because I didn't practice as much, probably because my voice hadn't matured at all. And every single song you could definitely tell was pre-puberty. But it's something about it where, as a creative, I feel like, because I've been making music for 4 years, my drive to kind of expand, and even my competitive drive to want to be on top of everything, has really led me to search out different avenues of what I'm doing. And just in every way that I can try and develop.
Okay. That's actually, it's really awesome. And it's definitely something, because I feel like it's something that other artists can sort of take a page out of that book. Not to say like, we should all idolize each other, but at the same time, like, it's definitely not to be undersold when you have a working way of going about things. And like, even if you say like all that stuff was prepubescent, that it doesn't matter, because it's still, actualized creativity and artistry put into music and then released to the world. And now you have all of this practice, and especially like you said, 2 years ago maybe you couldn't make a singing song, but now you've been doing it for a couple years. Maybe you've been practicing or writing them out or actually giving it a shot, and now you actually can. And that's the thing, like, you don't necessarily need 20 years of practice to do this. Like, I feel like college kind of has people messed up to say like, oh, you have to study this for,
has people fucked up.
Right? You have to study this for 5 years, and then you got to apprentice under somebody for 5 years, and then you got to try it, and you might fail, and then you're going to start a new brand, and then that might work, and people end up on this, crazy multiple decades long journey, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But there's so many examples of people who don't need to do all that, and they just kind of step into it without any direction and just start making music, and things happen naturally. Especially, like, I'm a big believer in that, things just kind of lining up perfectly on their own. It's almost like the universe conspires to make your dreams come true if you actually work for them. That's kind of the beautiful thing. Like, I don't know, I go off on rambles.
Manifestation.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I do too.
Yeah, I think we all avoid kind of talking about this, because it's like, we don't want to poke the spiritual woo-woo balloon and watch it pop and everybody starts tripping out. But at the same time, there are so many people on this earth, especially creatives, who go through this process of trying to make things happen, and you end up learning like it's only going to happen a certain way. Like you have to follow your energy. You have to be where you're meant to be, and people respond to that. And that's how you because even in the music industry we talk about this, but in a totally different way. It's like your energy when you go up on stage, when you make a song, when you record something, anything, it's got to be really authentic, and like you belong where you are, because you're going to impact people and they're going to respond to that. And suddenly because it's like when you make a brand, your fans now connect with you, and so now they're like your homies. But I digress. This is some different stuff. I'm kind of going off track.
No.
So 5 years from now, where do you see yourself?
That is an interesting question. Well, let's see. I normally do have a 5-year plan, but I just kind of, quote unquote, finished one. So I have to, start looking and start seeing. I've recently developed a new philosophy on music. And this is relevant, but I used to, and I mean, when I was a small artist, this was absolutely factual. I used to feel like I had to release a song every 2 weeks, every month. There was a summer where I released a song every 4 days, which was just ridiculous.
Wow.
And
that's wild.
Yeah, this shit was crazy. I don't know how I did that. And now I'm sitting back, and I am realizing, I always used to kind of view music as, when I started wanting it to be a career, I always viewed it as, this is something that I have to take seriously. I have to realize that, unfortunately, no one's made it off of music because they're dope. They made it because they're dope and they're doing these things to get them in front of people. Because I personally believe there are hundreds of thousands of artists who are making amazing tracks and they're not promoting. They're not collabing. They're not getting their name out. They're not talking to even small blogs. They're not trying to do shows or open for anybody or doing anything locally. They're just like, well, if I keep dropping this dope music, eventually it'll blow up. And what I've kind of realized is, after I took a step back from this philosophy and I see how the age of music is now, how consumerism is, Spotify doesn't care about projects, which is an unfortunate realization. When I grew up in the culture of what makes you a good rapper is having a dope album.
Mm-hmm.
But Spotify never promotes artists' projects. They don't promote Drake's albums. They don't promote Ariana's albums or Lizzo's. They promote singles. They're going to put a single track in their playlist.
Okay.
And so it doesn't care about the structure of your album anymore. It's all about singles now. And, for me and for the next 5 years, I've already built what I consider to be my core fan base. And I've already built what I consider to be a considerable discography that I can look back on and be like, I did this. And now, at least for what I'm doing with Lovesad-KID, I have to consider it as, I need to focus on my commercial success.
Right.
Starting to release singles and not releasing another one and just promoting it until it gets 1 million streams and then moving on to the next one. Because where I'm at is, I'm streaming well. I get 4 streams a listener, which is a crazy ratio. I get, I have almost 80,000 followers to 500,000 monthly listeners. And the average, good ratio is 1 to 10.
Wow.
But, I dropped growth because I thought, if I drop a dope album, this is what's going to blow me up. This is going to be my step into the next level. I kind of had to learn, I know for a fact, if I dropped growth as a single every 2 weeks, or even just stretched it the whole year and dropped a single every month, I would be 2-3 million monthly listeners right now. And it's a weird realization, but for me, in those next 5 years, what I'm going to be doing is focusing on the commercial aspect, the performing aspect, the visual aspect, because I've never really had music videos.
Okay.
And I do feel like that, because I do have good streaming and a good core fan base and people that care, and I've been creating long enough to know that when I do work, I'm going to make something that's good. I think in the next 5 years, I hope and believe to be topping charts. For me, I see myself as, I want to be a millionaire at 20. And I would say 19, but that's in 5 months and that's not happening. But I want to be a millionaire at 20. I want to own a few businesses at 22. I want to have bought multiple houses by 23. And by 23, I feel like, because that's where I'll be in 5 years, 23, 24. I feel like there's no reason that if I keep dropping this music and I do it more consistently, stronger, focus on the single aspect and the promotion aspect, there's no way I'm not on top of the world. Just because, and I'm going to say something that might come off as cocky, but I feel like as a rapper, specifically in the vein of a musician, you have to believe in your shit more than anyone else.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
No, for sure. I believe that personally, besides people that are already famous or already known for what they're doing, there aren't very many people rapping like me, creating like me, doing these things to the standard that I hold myself. And I've finally reached a point where I know that what's stopping me from being famous isn't that I'm not dope enough, it's that I'm not in front of enough people. So in 5 years, I see no reason why when you click my Spotify profile, it doesn't say top 10 in the world. By 23, I want to be doing shit that people couldn't even conceive people were doing at 23. And, right now is just when I'm putting in the work and, kind of trying to figure out the path that I need to take to become a household name.
Okay. And that makes perfect sense. And there's absolutely no reason that you can't do it when you set that goal and you're like, this is where I'm going. And especially I know what I'm doing it with. And you have, again, we already mentioned this, but you have a foundation, you have practice into it. There's a lot of people who, in the very beginning, they're like, I want to be a millionaire. I want to have multiple businesses. I want to be top 10 in the world. But they don't even know what their sound is, and they haven't been doing it for very long. So they don't know if that's going to change for after like a year of doing it. But you've been doing this for almost 5 years now. So it's like you are at a point where you're kind of laying everything down on the table and you're like, I just want to make all of this expand 10 times bigger.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we already kind of mentioned this, but more explicitly as a question, who were your biggest influences or are your biggest influences?
I'll kind of handle that question as like two parts because they've definitely changed. In the beginning, for me, I discovered rap on my own because, all that played around my house was like country and rock, and my dad's a huge Metallica fan. And so when I first heard rap, it was in school when my friend was playing like acid rap off of his phone. And I was like, I gotta know what that is. And so immediately off the bat, before I was even inspired to rap, Chance the Rapper was an inspiration. And through his music, I found Kyle, who was Super Duper Kyle at the time. And, those two, I mean, they inspired me to want to create. And a lot of my early music that is just sitting on a hard drive somewhere from when I was 13, 14, rapping into a headset mic. You can hear those influences if you can see past how it actually sounds. And
no, you can definitely hear the influence.
Yeah. As I started really rapping and like trying to get better, and I guess it does have to do with the early RapPad community. I would be influenced and get feedback constantly from people like Dom, from people like Nick Grace and Matter and Project and like all those old people. There was a dude named like Mike on there too, who was like Australian.
I remember.
Constantly give me feedback. Yeah. And from that point, Dom was like my inspiration and Nick Grace was my inspiration. I was like, I have to get like these people. Which I think was both positive and negative in the sense that I was basing my milestones off of easily attainable things, which to me personally, I feel like what's really made me work is putting my milestones as something like, how could I possibly do this? And then doing it. But also being able to be inspired by my peers and then speak to them really did help me develop flow. Like Dom, since I first heard like one of his tracks off of like Free Dom, always knew how to flow. He was coming up with crazy flows. There was a RapPad cipher, which he didn't win somehow, where he did like a slow it down thing.
Oh yeah.
And he changed the flow, like he slowed it down and sped it up. I still ask him for that sometimes because I'm just like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I remember
Man.
that was like really, really mind blowing.
I
And
was
he took
listening
it
to that and I
down.
was like, holy shit. He took it down because he was mad he didn't, but it happens.
You know, back then, man, there was a lot of competition.
Yeah. And I mean, even on that, the competition is what inspired me. Because personally going back, I wasn't in it. I was just one of those people outside still doing mostly writtens. But, you know, feeling that competition to people I considered my peers really drove me to try and take a step to the next level. And, you know, when I came back around at like 15, my inspirations were people like Atlas and Samsa and the people who made lo-fi. Because when I started making lo-fi, I didn't know anybody else was rapping over these beats. I guess that's like a clueless of me, but I just had no clue anyone else was rapping over these beats. And when they started gaining any traction, the only comments I would get are, yo, this sounds like Atlas, or yo, this sounds like Samsa. And as a young artist, I'll admit, I was like, yo, I don't know who these people are, but I'm me, so you got to stop comparing me to those people. That's disrespectful. And then I listened. And, you know, from being able to hear people that were making music in a similar vein to me, I was like, wow, this sounds like me, but better. How do I get to this level? And they inspired me to kind of, again, just up the ante, get better and better. For a while, my main inspirations, I'd say for like a 2-year period from, you know, the ending of my spending most of my time on RapPad forums to starting to really develop the lo-fi rap sound. Everything was kind of condensed into, I only listened to, only talked to, only was inspired by my peers. Until just around the time where Atlas and Samsa left music at like the same time and just disappeared. And then I'd say from 2018 to now, the biggest influences that I have would be people like Saba. I've been listening to a lot of Schoolboy Q recently. And realistically, a lot of smaller artists too. Rather than listening to my peers, you know, I do go down SoundCloud tunnels where I go to a related track and a related track and a related track and a related track. Because I crave inspiration from things that aren't really, people aren't already using for inspiration. Not to say that I won't try to put a dope artist on. One of my favorite rappers, to me, I've heard in my whole life, is named Onodera. And he's this dope ass MC out of New York. And he has 172 monthly listeners. And I got him on Growth because he's so creative, produces all of his stuff, can sing, raps like nobody else. And, you know, from the moment I found him in like summer of 2018 to now, everything he drops to me, if not on the sound level, like I want to make something that sounds like that, is inspiring to me. Like, wow, this makes me want to create better. And on that note, I do think that, you know, inspirations for me even have evolved from being like, I want to sound like this person, I want to rap like this person, to now people who inspire me to create. And so when I listen to my inspirations now, I don't want to make music. They don't influence me. They more so, you know, I listen to an Onodera track and I'm like, I need to write right now because this was so dope. It got my like artist blood pumping, and I'm like, I gotta spit something. I gotta sing something. There's an artist I recently found named Bickle, which is like pickle but with a B, which is a very weird name. He has one song out and it's called Naked. And it's one of the most unique songs I've heard in my whole life. And I don't want to make a song like it, but every time I listen to that song, there is nothing that I want to do but like create, besides maybe dance. And I mean, I'll even send that track just for you guys to listen to.
Hell yeah.
And it's just like, I really do think it's kind of cool, the levels of influence where, as I've kind of come into my own, I feel like I know what I sound like, what I want to sound like. I don't listen to anybody to kind of get that vibe anymore. But, you know, when I'm having writer's block, there are people who, if I hear anything by them, it's just like it can knock down a wall for me. But yeah, Onodera is like my influence now. Bickle, Abi the Nomad is a big one. I've been listening to him for like a year or two. And just all these people who are not famous, but are creating their own sound and their own niche and their own development. And it does really speak to me because there's something about, you know, being able to just focus on creating your own music instead of your music because someone else's music. Which is a weird sentence, but I think you get what I mean.
Right. And it's interesting because, you know, I bring up influences because it's really, really important. It goes a long way to explain sort of where your fire comes from and what you add into it, what you're bringing into the mix. And for me, like, I've been kind of on this journey to find like the most powerful music that I could find anywhere. But for you, it might be more so you want to find people who are doing this right now, who are incredibly creative and doing their own thing. Like I'll find music from any time period, any location on the earth, any popularity. But for you, it might be more so about sort of the locality of it and people's ability to kind of, how you say, do something without really being like, without trying to make it. Like when you find music on SoundCloud that's like, you know, it's got 15K listens or something, but it's not famous or blown up, and it's so much better than 90% of the stuff you hear in the mainstream or something. There's really something special about that, and it feels incredibly powerful too. It makes you feel small, actually, because you're like, this person is, you know, they probably have a day job or something. They're probably grinding all day just to put in 2 hours at night. And the thing that they make with their 2 hours at night is like incredible compared to what I might expect or what I might be doing on my own. So I think your take on it is super, super interesting. So I know we talked a lot about this for hip hop in general, like how you kind of came into it and kind of turned it into a career naturally. But when you were a kid, did you really want to do music? Like, was there like a foundation like that? So how did that? Go ahead. No.
I wanted to play football.
Okay, that's really interesting.
I had scouts. I was doing real good. To me, music was fun, and there was nothing that I felt more inspired to do than run the ball. Um, and the definitive change for that for me was around 15. I hit a streak where I was crazy depressed. I couldn't get out of bed to go to school. I didn't want to talk to anybody or wash my hair even. I had difficulty doing just about anything. Um, I mean, even football. My grades were slipping when I was like an A student. And, you know, I had to get therapy. I had to get homeschooled because, my therapist did identify that school and the environment around it was part of the problem. And, when I was homeschooled, football was immediately not an option anymore. At the very least, until I was, well enough to go back. And honestly, I feel like there was never a time period where I was well enough to go back to school. I just kind of became that way. And throughout that time period, the only thing that I was doing besides going to therapy and hanging out with my dog and my parents was making music, was creating. And in its own sort of way, it went from, yeah, I like to freestyle in the locker rooms with my friends. Yeah, I like to go on RapPad in class sometimes to like see what's going on in the forums, to, this is one of the only things that gives me relief from the inside of my head. This is one of the only things that, I didn't feel bad when I was writing, because the only thing that I could ever think about was, are there too many syllables in this line, And it kind of took that step from, being something that was fun to something that, to me personally, I do feel was life-saving. And then even so, I realized I probably didn't have that opportunity at football anymore. I was being scouted as a sophomore, but I was gone for a year. And in Texas, once you're not in someone's face, they don't care about you anymore because there's 100 people who can run a 4.4 and all this stuff, And not in like any type of sad way or whatever, but I realized that's not a career option for me, especially because that's a very rare career option too. There's not that many people in the and so I realized, and this was before I was making money, but I was like, hey, I kind of want to do something with this music thing. And something about me that used to be a nuisance, but I kind of like now, is when I do something, when I enjoy something, I have the drive to be the best at it. And so when I started really liking music, I told myself I have to make it to where there's not, like, no one could even make an argument that someone's a better rapper than me. And I think that's going to be something that drives me my whole life. I mean, it narrows down to levels like I just started cooking recently, cooking for myself, because I realized I spent way too much money eating out. And I realized steaks are like $15. When you go to a restaurant, they're like 50. And I just started cooking recently, and I've sat down with myself and I'm like, I want to own a Michelin star restaurant by 25. And I'm like, why do I think like this? But,
dude,
I started playing a game recently.
I cook as well, and I get the exact same thing. I'll cook something like so I'm vegan. I'll make cheese sauce with nutritional yeast and almond milk, and I'll put it over like broccoli and Beyond Meat, and I'll do like garlic and all this stuff, and I'm sitting there eating it, and I'm like, man, I just want to open up a restaurant with like all of this stuff, and for whatever reason, because there's something so gratifying about doing that. But I digress. Like I found that point like really, really interesting because I feel like a lot of people who cook probably feel the same way. Like if you make, it's like you make music that you enjoy listening to, right? You also make food that you enjoy eating. So we all have the same kind of compulsion as creators. When you make something that like you really connect to, you're like, I want to share this with people. I find that really, really cool.
No, yeah. And for me, it always takes that like crazy step forward, which is why, I used to hold myself back from wanting to do too many things. Because I mean, like, even on the slightest example, I started playing a game called Rainbow Six Siege, and one of my goals is to eventually make it to Pro League while being a full-time musician, while figuring out how I'm going to do a Michelin star restaurant. I want to be an actor. I want to be a journalist and a model and an author. And I don't know if the facts are all correct, but I remember a few years ago reading about, this award you can get where basically if you win like all 5 like major awards, like an Oscar, Grammy, or like a Pulitzer, journalist award, which I don't know which one, like whatever that's called, and like a Nobel Prize and all that. It's like you win a big 5 and there's like this thing that you can get. I gotta find out what that is, but I want to do all of that. My goal has always been, I want to change the world. And, I thought I wanted to do it by being the greatest running back of all time. But now I feel like I've realized my dream more, because once music stopped being a hobby, once it started being, a saving grace for me, I was like, I don't ever want to work a job. If I can't do school, I sure as hell can't do a job. And I was like, well, people make money off of music. I want to make money off of music. I want to be the best to ever do it. And that kind of obsession I have with creating and, being the best in what I do, one, has taken over my life and everything I enjoy. But 2, when I hit that point, it just... I've never had any doubts since. The turning point definitely was like, I dropped Lovesad-KID and I saw it start to do some numbers on the internet, and I was like, I can do this. And I mean, I even told my best friend, who's my girlfriend right now, who I met off of music and like developed a friendship with over RapPad, like, I want to be Kanye famous. I want to be Elvis famous. I want to be able to go to a country where they don't have internet and people recognize me. And I think at the end of the day, my goal is, I don't want to just be somebody. I want to be the person. Which is a huge goal. And I'd honestly be happy if I even came close to it. But that is kind of when I decided, like, this is my career, this is my life, this is what I'm gonna buy a house off of and pay my bills from. And so far so good, but I moved out to LA and it is hard to pay for shit.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I was in Kansas.
Oh man. Yeah, it's funny. When you go into that realm of like, kind of, you don't ever get like a free meal from like your homie or your mom or anything like that. Like you gotta buy every single one, and you spend a lot of your time like either alone or with the person you live with, and you're on your own. It's just it can be really, really, really surprising what that actually costs, like both mentally and physically and financially. Like I think a lot of us, like especially when I was on RapPad and we first spoke, I was still living with my mother, and then I went out to Oregon, and when I went out to Oregon, I was still back on the forums for a while, but when I kind of went off on my own and I was living alone, all this stuff, I wasn't on RapPad at all. And I can tell you, I was freaking out, dude. Like my dad had moved out of the state. I was living with a total stranger. I was working at a gas station. It was like, you know, Portland, Oregon is cold in the winter. It's just raining. It freezes at night and then it thaws in the morning. Like I have to get up before it. You know, it's like being an adult on so many levels, even if you don't have a job and even if you're self-made and you're doing all that, it can still be a challenge, especially like starting out. So I don't really know how much live performance you've done over the years, like on a consistent basis. Like I know that you do a lot, but then also I don't know if you've done like full scale tours and stuff like that. But just in general, what do you think the most memorable moment of all of that would be?
Well, so I've opened for Hobo Johnson on his Bring Your Mom tour, and then I opened for Oliver Tree on his Ugly is Beautiful tour. Hobo Johnson, I just had the first leg and I stopped once we got to the East. And then Oliver Tree, I just did the whole tour. I think besides one show, which was really weird. I don't know, but oh wait, no, I did that show too. It was just like I went home, I went to Tennessee to do that show, and then I went back home, and it was just confusing. But I mean, yeah, I've done about and to me, the most memorable moment would have to be, I don't know the exact date, so I'm going to talk while I try to look for it. But it'd have to be like Salt Lake City. February 24th of 2019.
Okay.
Salt Lake City. We're in this huge club. 2,000, like 2,400 people are there. Sold out show. There's a mezzanine that has like maybe 200 people in it, and from the front of the stage to back, I couldn't see the people in the back. It just looked like there were figures. Biggest show I performed. And like for Hobo Johnson, there were, you know, there were 2,000 show venues, or 2,000 people venues. So it wasn't like it was like, it probably was the biggest performance, but it wasn't like I hadn't done anything close. But everything went right. You know, I knew every single lyric. The crowd, the energy was immaculate, which is crazy because as an opener, I've learned you have 30 minutes to make these people who think you're a waste of their time, that you're even worth listening to. You know, they don't give a fuck about you. They're having conversations over your performance. They're standing there on their phones. You're basically just killing time, and they would have rather heard the music that was playing from the speakers while they're standing there waiting for the main artist. And, you know, I had to learn, like, in those 30 minutes, you have to just do the craziest things you can imagine. But everything went perfect. And from the second I walked on stage and they were excited to see me, to performing the first song, which is always Cash, because when I'm opening and no one's listening to me, if I start off with that song, everyone's like, whoa, who is this person? Everything was just immaculate. The crowd was with it. There were people in the front who knew who I was and were singing my lyrics. And it felt like as much as I wanted their attention and to give them a performance, they reciprocated. And without fail, anytime someone asks me what my favorite city to perform was, what the best show was, it was that. It was Salt Lake City, Utah, for some reason. I couldn't imagine. I had just bought a new coat, like, that I wore on stage, and I was like, I'm the coolest person to ever make music. Like, the only problem that I had was it was like 14 degrees outside. And so I just got done performing, and like, you wear layers so that as you perform, you take them off. And yeah, I've been losing a lot of weight recently, but I was hefty then. And I was like, I got off stage, I'm just in like a muscle tee and like my pants and my boots, and I'm carrying all my stuff, and I walk off stage and I open the door and I forgot that it was 14 degrees outside. And so immediately all of the sweat that was on me froze, and I was just standing there like, this is the day that I'd pass away. I just remember everything about that show. The set list, like, my old guitarist was eating food on stage, like, every single thing. Salt Lake City, Utah, I want to perform there again. Boring ass city. Besides that performance, everything was really weird. Like, I don't know, but
I drove through there, I think in 2018, and or 2017, and it was interesting. It was like, the only thing that really stood out to me was the mountains in the back, and just like how incredibly looming they are. Because you kind of look up and you're like, damn, people go up there to ski all the time,
huge.
Huh? Yeah, they are like they're ridiculously close. Is kind of like the most, like,
yeah, that's how they feel,
right? Because it feels like you could like walk past the city line and just kind of walk down the field and just straight up the mountain, like, out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But that story is actually fantastic. I can't really think of like a great, like, super deep takeaway for it, but really it's just like a dope story, and I love that. And especially that's one of the great things about traveling around, is like, it doesn't necessarily need to be like every moment is super profound and like, you know, you're performing in front of 10,000 people, but like, man, really killing it on stage and having a group of people, like, especially when you're nervous at first, there's that feeling is unmatched. Yeah, it's crazy.
And then the energy of, like, to me, nothing's crazier than that, like, 5 seconds of, I just finished this song and the crowd hasn't started, like, doing anything yet. And that 5 seconds of just, it's almost like a tension, but not in like a uncomfortable way, is one of the craziest feelings to me. Because beginning to end, like, it creates this feeling in the air that's just shattered when people cheer and clap. And it's so, like, beautiful isn't necessarily the word, but like, it just feels insane. And like, I think about it all the time. It's one of the main things that I hate about coronavirus is I definitely would have performed a whole lot this year. And now I'm here painting bottles in my room.
Hey man, I think we're all just doing our best to get by at this point, right?
Oh no, most definitely.
But it's I think this is something I've seen mentioned a lot, but ironically, I remember I told my mother, I was like heavily predicting that something was going to happen, at least in America, that was going to force people to take a look at themselves. And then this year, actually, the coronavirus lockdown happened on my birthday. And I lost my job on my birthday. It was
oh, no.
It was horrendous. It was just the weirdest day. So much other stuff happened. But I remember like maybe a month and a half later, just kind of like really realizing, like, for a lot of people, it was both, it's a curse for sure, but then the lockdown and kind of being forced to be in your own space, take care of yourself,
Just be by yourself.
and then so you learn to cook, or you learn to make music for the first time, or like you learn a new skill, or you just sit and you meditate. But a lot of people don't find time for that usually. So this has become like a really interesting opportunity for a lot of people who normally wouldn't find time to do anything, and then they had way too much time to do everything.
Sorry, my keyboard is like super clacky.
Oh no, you're great. So your project was called Growth.
Mm-hmm.
How many tracks was that?
10 tracks.
Okay.
30 minutes.
It's dope. So so you called it Growth. So obviously it has a deep connection to how you've changed. Define sort of what the name connects to in the history leading up to the creation, but then also how you grew while making the album.
That's a good question. So, growth to me, just to kind of handle the first part, is in essence all of 2019, really. I didn't make music until about November.
Okay.
I didn't write, release. That was a crucial time period in my life where, you know, I was 16, about to turn 17 on my birthday. And, you know, I was about to move out to LA. I just finished my second tour, and I had to decide who I wanted to be. I kind of messed up in life and, you know, had to fix some things in, you know, my relationship with my girlfriend, my relationship with my parents. And even like, I didn't even talk to my siblings much. And through that past year, and then I guess kind of growing throughout it, kind of learning who I want to be, and almost completely scrapping and then rebuilding my personality over that time period. To me, it felt in a whole year being introspective and on growth. And I didn't even actually start writing Growth until I'd say November or December, when I made Poison Ivy. And I made Poison Ivy after making Roller Rank and Ephemeral. So I guess I made Ephemeral, but I didn't know it was going to be on Growth. I made Poison Ivy and I was like, this is really good. I want to make a project around this. And then we started the process of making the whole, I don't want to say album, but, you know, like LP in like 3 months. And to me, it is less about the intended direction that I was taking when I was writing it. Because like for Lovesad-KID, when I was writing that, like the self-titled thing, when I was writing that, I knew the story that I was going to tell. I was like, this is a thing that happened to me. I'm just going to figure out a way to break it down into like 10 tracks. For Growth, it was, I was making these tracks and they all had meaning to me, and they didn't connect until I started trying to put them together. I mean, to take it from the top, Throwaway and Partial Excellence, I wrote those because I really wanted to spit. Like, I was like, I gotta start rapping. And I feel like, and like the beat change, I told Garrett, I was like, I've been listening to Nights by Frank Ocean and I need a transition like that. And all these things. And when I actually sat down and re-listened to it, I realized I kind of unintentionally, like in Throwaway, I was speaking to myself, you know? I was talking on my feelings of being inadequate and, you know, what that's done to me, and kind of a call to action for myself to get to work. And at that point in time, my music did take a shift into being more for myself than like a love song to someone else. And Partial Excellence, which I didn't write them together, like we combined the tracks later on. Partial Excellence, you know, I just wanted to rap or spit, but I realized afterwards that I was really talking about how one of the reasons that I did take a break in music, and one of the reasons that I struggled with it, was because I did allow myself to be okay with dropping an okay song. And something to me is like, obviously as an artist you do whatever you want, but I've started to think like I need to be pushing out the best product that I can instead of something that's okay. Obviously I'm not going to go as in depth on like every song, but like every single song means something to me in the sense of how much, and like certain topics that I experience while redeveloping who I was as a person and doing all the growing that I didn't allow myself to, because I decided I had to grow up way too fast. And, you know, I was someone who at 15 always felt like, well, I could be an adult. And my mom would be like, no. And I thought she was wrong. But come to realize she's completely right. And I still don't feel like I'm who I need to be, where I'm going to be. I feel like in 4 years, I'm going to be a different person still. But, you know, Habits is about breaking my habits. Poison Ivy is about getting caught up on certain things. And Hopscotch is, I mean, the contrast from my verse to Onodera's is that kind of building pressure to want to be somebody. And then his verse is the, why am I not already somebody? I've put all this blood, sweat, and tears in. And the hook is just dope. And then Growth, the title track, to me really is more of a vibe than a certain, like, I didn't write it with a specific meaning, even though I guess the hook is like you're talking about growth, but I wrote it because that entire vibe that it gives me, you know, I can just see myself maturing, see myself realizing things that I didn't before, and see myself coming to terms and being okay with the fact that, you know, I don't always have to know everything. I don't always have to be on top. I'm not worth less because I don't entirely realize, you know, who I want to be. And I guess the process that I went through with making Growth was kind of half and half. Parts of I really felt like I needed to make a dedicated project of where I'm at musically, the level and dedication that I'm at musically, and, you know, the quality that I can do, and as well as, rather than storytelling like I did in Lovesad-KID, speaking on the elements and vibes I got from really taking that year out and becoming a person. And I mean, even writing it did help me get more of an understanding, because sometimes I feel like in my head I jumble up emotions and don't really understand myself. And when I write it down and re-listen, and, you know, even when it's going on like mixing and stuff, and I really have to like sit down and understand what I'm saying, it does help me get a better grasp on everything that I feel. Growth for me was definitely like a process of like just writing it was about who I wanted to be, and writing it helped me realize who I want to be. More than just like my goals and dreams. Like, as a person.
Well, there's something really transformative about, especially like you have a goal when you sit down to write something, but it's not written, so it's not clearly defined. And then when you kind of get to the other side of that bridge and it's there in front of you and you're rehearsing it and it's created, it's really transformative. I don't really know how else to think about it, but kind of like it's extremely gratifying, but then it's also like something that you were stuck on is now out, and you get to kind of leave it there on the paper and step away, and you can kind of come back to that anytime you want. But since the release, how do you think sort of having that project out, having it in your discography has kind of changed you and really just your brand?
That's a question. I feel two ways about it. I'm ecstatic that I have it in my discography. I feel like when I wrote it, when I dropped it, that is the best that I could have done. And it's such a milestone for me to even make songs past 1 minute. And to just have 10 of them that I feel like really fit together, really breathe and interconnect and make a project. It's huge to me as an artist. And I know that in years I'll look back and I'm going to be like, wow, I did this. And I also hope that other people do too. But additionally, there is a bit of regret in releasing Growth. Because like I said, when it comes to streaming, like my goal obviously is to tell my story and write my music, but it is also to be super famous. It is also to be able to live off of music and support my family. And if I think about it from a business perspective, Growth was a lot of investment that I didn't give the right development to let it pay off. Like I spoke about earlier, projects don't really exist in terms of streaming anymore. And so, especially as a smaller artist like me, not to say like I'm like completely underground, but like as a smaller artist like me, Spotify's not going to support my album. They're going to support a few singles from it. And those few singles have done well. But realistically, there's regret that comes from releasing Growth as I did, because while I think it's a great project, I think it's going to be timeless. I think when I am famous, people are going to come back and look at it and be like, wow, like people have just started doing with 10 Day. But I know right now it's stunted my growth because like streaming wise and like stats wise, because I basically clogged up my own algorithm with 10 songs. And it basically was just a bad business move. And so while I'm happy to have it in my discography, most of those songs did underperform. And while they did good comparative to other artists I know, you know, at 500,000 monthly listeners, I should be focused on trying to get one song, not dropping a magnum opus.
Right. Because you want to have sort of that extra crazy foundation of like 1 million monthly listeners or 2 million, and then drop a magnum opus. Because when you drop something that's really, really good, you know, it's like viral media. It's only as effective as, you know, those first like few days or few weeks when people are sharing it around and really going crazy over it. And then it kind of like goes throughout the system. Everybody picks up on it. But if you don't have that super impactful first couple weeks, it can just as easily kind of taper off into what you already have going on. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think we all as artists have to at some point recognize, like, there's a system happening here. Like, there's a system to how people blow up and end up on Chance the Rapper level. Like, you can't just sort of drop a project and expect your own fan base to make it happen. Like, you gotta go at it in a certain way. So I think that's like a really interesting point. But also it's interesting because you made an album called Growth, and even after the fact, you're still learning more about yourself and what you can do as an artist, even from just the fact that you put that out there. But I think that's good. Like, you know, we all have our own opinions, but especially like when you put out a project like that, like 10 Day, for example, it could have done a lot better, in my opinion. Like, he had some pretty big names on that, and when he put it out, it probably could have blown up way more. But obviously, like, Chance had that first tape, which was super impactful and profound. And then he took everything he learned from, because this is awesome. The first song in Acid Rap is Better Than I Was the Last Time, baby. Like, that's the first line that he drops. And so that's kind of like
the first line you hear for like 3 years.
Right. And it's kind of like he learned so much from that last project, and then going into it with so much skill and passion. Like, he knew exactly what he wanted to do and how he was going to do it. Like, especially, you mentioned Chance the Rapper was an inspiration. I actually, I found Chance the Rapper while I was in some, like, really serious trouble when I was 16. And so I used to sit in this room, and I didn't have a computer or anything like that, and I would stare at the wall, and I had papers. I had somebody bring me papers of Chance the Rapper's lyrics from Acid Rap, so I could learn every single song from the first word to the end and actually rehearse them. Because at the time I didn't make music, but I was like, I want to know. But yeah, I just, honestly, this was like a beautiful conversation, and it's really inspirational to kind of hear from you and to hear about like the way that all of this happened. And even at this point in your life, you're able to look back and be like, yeah, there was a certain quality to my old music that, I might not be so into now, but also there's something to appreciate about all of that. And it's definitely, like, I wouldn't agree that all of your old music might be cringe in some way, like with the love songs and stuff like that. I think I had a certain perspective on it when I was younger about love songs and things of that nature. And really, I think it's like when you're honest, when your life is about stuff like that and you're honest, it's like no holds barred. Like, not everybody is going to enjoy love songs or enjoy that kind of vibe, but it doesn't mean that it's cringy, and it doesn't mean that it's not worth doing, if that makes sense.
No, true.
Because I feel like a lot of people would be like, oh, I don't want to go into that realm. Like, even if all they think about is relationships or hitting up their crush or something, maybe they don't want to make music about it because they're like, oh, I don't think anybody would want to hear me. But at the same time, it's so worth it to just kind of do whatever is natural to you. And so getting your perspective on that is kind of like, that's what you built off of. And even then, because you started so young, so when you start young, when you're 14, you start making music, when I was 14, I was surrounded by adults. All of my friends were adults, like 20 to 30 years old. And people would tell me all the time, dude, you don't know anything. And I would be like, I don't know what you're talking about, bro, because I feel like a lot of adults are just full of it. And, I've by then I had seen some really wild stuff. So I was like kind of full of it, like personally. But then as you get older, you start looking back. People are like, just look back on yourself in 2 years and you're going to be laughing at the stuff that you're saying right now. And you'll laugh at them. But then 2 years later, it really, really manifests. I think it's something to appreciate. Because there's a lot of kids who actually go out of their way when they grow up they try to avoid all that, and then they turn 35 and they're like, man, I gotta
deal with all that shit. Yeah.
It's great stuff. So I don't have any more questions. I really, really appreciate you doing this. This was like super awesome. We've been going for an hour and 40 minutes, which is a pretty long time.
It's just a podcast, basically.
At this point, yeah. But it was just, personally, I feel like, I learned a little bit from this, and I also I take a lot of inspiration from conversations like this. So just in general, I just thank you. Thank you for the great interview. And do you have any future projects, anything you want to plug, any medias you want to plug?
Follow me on Instagram. Oh, okay, that's Milton. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, all of those good things everybody knows. But
we'll put handles down in the description too.
Realistically, no, I'm just feeling good about this conversation. It is 4 a.m., but the vibes are immaculate. Yeah, I mean, I just love talking about this stuff. And realistically, what I'm doing for the rest of the year is we're going to focus on re-promoting growth and taking more time into, making sure we get all of the streams that we can out of it. So for people who are looking for new music from me, you could do two things, which one is wait, or two is stream growth, so that you get it sooner. But yeah, I mean, I'm just chilling, trying to stay sane in quarantine.
Yeah, you're living in California right now, which is man, that's a spot to be in for this.
Yeah, and people every day outside are meeting each other, talking to new people because they got new dogs, standing this close from each other, and I'm like, you guys are killing me. Nothing has made me want to leave America and live somewhere else more than seeing how Californians handle a pandemic.
Well,
it is just killing.
We as Americans have a tendency to kind of see a situation happen and we're like, yeah, but you can't tell me anything. You can't tell me anything about how this is going to work.
Yeah, you can't tell me nothing.
And I feel like, especially on the West Coast with the huge culture and the huge population, it's just an exemplification of that kind of energy. I live in Connecticut right now. So where I am, it's almost like it's not even happening. Whereas in California, it's literally everywhere. But with that being said, I'm going to cut off the recording here. So
for sure.
Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, it was really a privilege to do this.